I want to call the meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled Greer City Council meeting called and convened this evening, June 13th, 2017. Having called the meeting to order, I'd like to ask Councilwoman Kimberly Bookert if she would please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and an invocation for council. If you'd like to rise and join us, you may.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Lord, we come before you now as humble as we know how, again saying thank you for this beautiful day you've granted us. We thank you, God, for the many blessings that you've bestowed upon each and every one of our lives. God, as always, we ask you continue to bless our citizens. God, continue to bless our employees, to allow them to enrich and learn more, to bless our city. God, we ask and are praying a special blessing on this evening for our fellow councilman, Mr. Wayne, and his family. You touch only the way that you know how to do it. You go in and heal where healing is needed, and you touch and move on their behalf. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Ms. Duncan, anyone to appear in public forum this evening?
No, sir.
With that, council, we'll move to the minutes of the council meeting. You have the minutes from May 30th in front of you. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any items of note for the clerk? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowwood?
Yes.
Ms. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert? Yes. Mayor Danner?
Yes. Council, this evening we've got a presentation by Mr. David Seifert. Mr. Seifert is our Chief Financial Officer, and his area of responsibility not only includes that side of things, but also IT and some other areas upstairs. And so his report is coming to us this evening. So the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you previously stated, it is time for the annual presentation for Finance and Information Technology. We're very pleased and appreciate the opportunity to bring this to you tonight. It is an annual opportunity to do an annual wrap-up. We do come before you, each month with little monthly snapshots, but today we're bringing a much larger overview for the entire year, so we very much appreciate that opportunity. I've provided a slide deck for you at your desk. There is more detail in that slide deck. It is in the slides, but I'm not going to cover it all tonight in orally. Attached to that slide deck is also a large spreadsheet that is a list of our information technology projects. We will be referencing that later in the presentation. We are all very familiar with our vision, mission, and our value statements here at the city. And our goal is to honor these concepts as it applies to both finance and information technology. We do this through open evaluation of every task or project that we perform, being open and honest in our governmental responsibilities while providing effective and efficient services through fiscal responsibility. The strategic plan provides guidance in developing these effective and efficient services. The initiatives in our strategic plan for fiscal responsibility are listed on this slide. They are financial condition, unassigned fund balance, revenue over expenditures, personnel budget, debt margin, and significant material findings. For the year 2016, all of our indicators were at or above target. Now, if you remember last year, we did have one that was slightly below target. That was the significant material findings, and we did correct that issue. So again, this year, we are all the indicators are at or above target. For the vision and the mission, of course, everything we do starts with our staff. Our staff are our most important resource. Without them, we could not perform the initiatives detailed in our vision, mission, and strategic plan. For the finance department, this has been a comparatively busy hiring year for us, with 4 hires during the year. 3 of those are currently still on staff with us. The 2 ladies pictured here are Oksana Marchuk and Katrina Woodruff, and I'm sure that you have seen these 2 ladies working at the front desk. The 3rd person hired is Tim Roberts. You may not have seen him. He's behind the scenes and is our newest business license inspector. So moving to our financial review. Now you'll see some of this data, depending on what it is. Some of the financial data is for calendar year 16. Some of the data will be for calendar year 16. And this is a slide that we are used to seeing, but it's always useful to review it. This is a slide showing the changes in fund balance back to the fiscal year 2007. You can see there that we've had great operational results for the last 6 years, with our low fund balance point in 2010 at the end of the recession. But you can see we have steadily recovered and now post an unreserved fund balance in excess of $9.9 million. We first met our 35% target, which is indicated by the yellow line running horizontally across the graph. First met our fund balance target in 2015, and as you can tell in the graph, we have continued to improve our financial condition. Now, as detailed on this slide, I've taken that a step further and projected the fund balance for the fiscal year 17. We started with the general fund budget that we are proposing tonight of $24,181,000. 35% of that, which is our fund balance target, gives us a target of $8.4 million. Our current unassigned fund balance is $9.9 million. And here's where the projection comes in. We're in a very successful fiscal year right now, and I'm projecting approximately about $1.7 million that will be added to our fund balance for the current year. Gives us a total estimated excess of target of over $3.1 million. Now, of course, as we stated in the financial policies, that once we break that threshold, we can apply those dollars to projects as council assigns those dollars to. So you're very aware of the large projects that we have coming in our future. So this is certainly an opportunity to apply some of those dollars to towards those projects. In this chart, we're comparing our budget, which is the blue line, capitalized assets, which is the yellow line, and our assessed value of property in the city, which is the pink line. I want you to really focus on the blue and the pink lines. As you can see in the blue, which is our budget, has remained fairly flat, seeing growth of approximately $5 million from the period, from the fiscal year 2007 to the current. While it has increased $5 million, our assessed value has increased by approximately $41 million. So in terms of percentage, using 2007 as the base, our budget has grown about 30%, while over the same period, the assessed value has grown by 58%. That's almost a 2-to-1 ratio of assessed value to budget growth. So I want to explore that relationship a little bit more between the assessed value and the budgets. We see that over time, our budget as a percentage of assessed value is declining. Since 2002, our budget as a percentage of assessed value has decreased approximately 5.5%, which equates to a 23.3% decrease. Now, you could interpret that in multiple ways. For instance, you could interpret this as a meaning we are not keeping up with growth. However, you could also argue that this is sound and prudent fiscal responsibility, as we have not gone without anything we needed for operations while not also artificially inflating the budget. Here in this graph, we are identifying the blue line as population growth. You can see that it increased approximately 29% in the last 10 years. This population growth drives housing starts as well as commercial development. During that same period, our millage has remained relatively flat with only a slight increase in 2011. These last 2 slides combined together tell a story that our city budgets have increased and met our operational needs, while not increasing taxes. And this is all due to the population and commercial growth that the city is experiencing. Moving to relative elements of our economy, there are certain line items that we look at in our budget that give us indicators of how our local economy is performing. To read this graph, the purple, blue, and green lines are read using the primary axis on the left side of the graph, which is the number of projects. The black line uses the axis on the right-hand side of the graph, which is construction value in millions of dollars. You can see in the period, both prior and subsequent to the recession, that show significant growth, with the drastic decline during the recession. Just prior to the recession, we were setting records for commercial development. And this past year, we have eclipsed all those records. Now, as an analysis goes into this, I really don't expect that these real high-level spikes will continue year after year after year, but I certainly do believe that our overall base will be increasing as a whole, with these spikes occurring every 2, 3, 4 years. But our overall growth, I do foresee continuing happening. Looking at permit fees and hospitality taxes, as indicated on the prior slide, the building permit fees declined during the recession, but they have recovered and set records for this past year. Our hospitality fees held steady with a small decline in the end of the recession, but have continued to increase since then, also eclipsing prior year's revenue numbers. In previous years, we've been experiencing growth in the 12 to 13% range, but right now we're still experiencing growth a little less than that, but it's about 8.5%. Still very strong growth in the hospitality market. And then last, we'll look at property taxes and business license taxes. And you can see in the property taxes, they've continued to increase through the recession as previously built properties came onto the tax rolls. Now, as you would expect, the business license revenue declined during the recession, and it's attributable to the decline of the construction that occurred during the city during that time. But as you can see there, it has also recovered and continued to increase. The conclusion from all three of these elements of economy slides, we have certain lines of revenue that are certainly volatile and are dependent on the economy and development in particular. As long as we are attentive and aware of our surroundings, we can adjust accordingly and then weather the changes that may occur. So moving to programs and statistics in the department, we'll start with the business license inspector position. This graph represents the enforcement activity that occurs through that office, which again, as stated previously, is heavily affected by the commercial activity occurring in the city. For 2016, the inspector's position generated approximately $158,000 in fees, which is $86,000 above our break-even cost for this position. Now, as you would expect, as the city has grown, our activity has increased. This year, in our finance office, we have topped in excess of 40,000 transactions. In 2013, the difference between the light purple and the dark purple, is when we started tracking the permit transactions. Since that period, when we started tracking permits, our transactional growth has increased by 31%, while our overall growth, going back to 2005, calculates to be in excess of 67,000%. Now, these program and transactions do include all the transactions processed by our clerks, accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, purchasing, and our cemetery program. Quickly looking at the clerical transactions, I did some quick analysis of some of these statistics back during the 2007, 2008, 2009 years when we had the most clerks. We had 6 full-time clerks. They were processing on average 2,025 transactions each per year. Looking at the transactions for 2016, they increased to over 5,600 transactions. That's almost a 3-to-1 ratio transactions they are processing today than they were back in 2009. Moving to information technology, we do keep in mind our vision and mission. The driving factors for technology their efficiency for our staff in accessing information, maintaining public safety, while providing recovery and legal compliance. We do this for all our service areas of accessibility, hardware and software, networking, security, and support services. Covering a few of the technology highlights, we started the year with 66 projects. We completed 19 and currently have 17 in process. We serve 475 endpoints in the city that generated 1,632 support calls. Now, of those support calls, we closed 91% within 4 hours. We unfortunately did have a few network outages. We had 4 that affected public safety on an average of 45 minutes each, but it was not the city's network. The city's network had no outages. We did experience 4 outages on the Greenville County network that supports the police department and dispatch. Now here's where we will start referencing the spreadsheet that I passed out at your desk. It's broken into 4 parts and 4 different slides based on the categories of not started, getting information, in process, or completed. So we have 15 projects that are currently not started, and they're mainly in the area of policies. We do have procedural practices in place, but we do not have the formal written policy. That is something that will be a high priority on the information technology programs for this coming year to get those policies, some of those policies in place. Moving to the next portion of getting information, we're currently gathering information, research, and demonstrations on 15 named projects. A number of them overlap into larger projects, such as the ERP and the maintenance software. They're broken out here in this slide as individual pieces, but we're combining them in the project for the research right now. For in-process projects, we have 17 that we're currently working on. We're receiving quotes and scheduling dates for these projects and installations. Now, some of these larger projects in this list are upgrading servers and switches in our core network and installing camera systems in various city facilities. We completed these 19 projects, the largest of which were participating in the reconstruction at Century Park, installation and expansion of our sand storage network, PCI credit card compliance, and of course the most notable and noticeable by you and the public is this event space, the upgrades to the AV systems here in the event halls. Now at the very end of the presentation, I have 2 videos that we're going to show you that will kind of show the performance of the audio, which has a poor video quality, and then we'll follow that with a real high definition video. So that'll take about 3 minutes for those 2 videos. Future projects that we're looking at, we have a long list of projects. We have 4 software systems in the areas of enterprise resource management, maintenance, permitting, customer service, and website upgrades. In addition to these, we will continue upgrading our meeting spaces to digital formats and replacing end-of-life equipment in our network. So now we're going to move to the 2 videos that will demonstrate some capabilities in the system. So just sit back and enjoy what you hear. lot better sound than our previous system. This one focuses on the definition of the video. So as you can see from those two videos, they were not really designed for the system as they were designed for Samsung and Dolby 5.1 surround sound, but it does illustrate the capabilities in this room, and I'm very pleased of the outcome that we've had installing this new system. So as this last slide shows, we are Team Greer, and we do keep our mission and vision in mind, and all of that goes to our goal of exceeding expectations for you, for our staff, and for our public and citizens. We'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Council?
David, thinking back to 2006, we set a bunch of housing records, and then the slide came, and you remember all the measures we had to take. We had to spend down basically savings. In your opinion, are we better positioned now? Have we done the right things since then to be in a better position for such a downturn?
Most definitely. At that particular time, we were budgeting based on projections. So we were budgeting growth. And in a high growth economy, if that's continuing, that's not a bad thing. But it does not take into account what happens if a recession hits. So that makes those cuts that much more drastic, because we were, at that particular moment, banking on that growth. So we had to cut back for the growth, and then we had to cut back for actual. So it made our cuts a lot deeper than they could have been. Since that time, we're budgeting based on history, what is actually coming in. Now, we know we are experiencing growth right now, but we're not budgeting next year's growth. So when we look at our property taxes, it is budgeted on what we've received today. Now we have 400 homes out there that hit the ground this year, or more than, there's like 580 or something, that will hit the tax rolls next year. And we're not budgeting for any of that. So we're doing, very smart fiscal decisions to better weather those occurrences and recessions and things like that. And what happens is, because we are budgeting at a lower level, the revenues are coming in higher. That increases our fund balance. So right now, in the 20 years that I've been here, the highest I think we had ever gotten was about $5 million in fund balance. And right now we're sitting on $9 million. We're in the best and strongest financial condition that we've been here, probably in the history of the city.
Mr. Seifert, in that same regard, I was talking to somebody from the county the other day, and in a discussion about reassessment, they made mention of the fact that in this current housing market, as many houses that are turning over, reassessment happens now at point of sale. And so rather than these 5-year increments with huge steps at some point in time, it was their take that it helped them not only in terms of budgeting, but projecting and smoothing out their budget over a long run. Is that our experience as well too? I mean, just looking at the kind of growth that we've had in terms of that assessment, it looks like it's charting a little bit more level kind of growth.
We are experiencing the same thing. We also, as you're aware, we're split by 2 counties. So up until this growth and turnover, we have the reassessment every 2 to 3 years, depending on the county. Because we're not reassessing our whole body of property, it's only a portion, so that even smooths it out for us even further. So we've been able to maintain our millage rate, at a constant level, absorb that growth through the natural reassessments that are occurring at sale and the ones that are happening when they do the reassessment program. But it does create a smoothing effect for us, yes, sir.
Given that our median home price is inching upward at a pretty steady rate as well, too, do we feel like we're capturing an equal amount of that growth as well, too? On the tax side?
I would have to say that's not a particular element that I've thought about, but just if it is hitting the tax rolls and it's going in at a higher rate on the tax roll, then yes, we are capturing it.
In regards to the outages, what happens when one of those systems, be it ours or theirs, is down for as much as 45 minutes at a time? What happens?
Some of those were planned. Greenville County was upgrading their system and across the county, so they were installing fiber. So our departments and the other city departments in the county knew they were going to be down. But when that happens, there's an automatic shunting from the calls coming to our call center. They automatically get shunted to the county call center.
And a quick update on our online payment system. Where are we on that? The ability to accept payments
association or us locally?
Us.
The software company that we're currently with does not. They only have online payment in utilities, which obviously we don't have. The software company that we're looking at does have online payment for all of their modules. So it'll be something we'll be implementing with this new software.
Thank you, sir. Others? I know some of your team is here this evening. If you want to recognize any of those folks.
Yes, sir. I do have 3 with us tonight, I think. Jim Ridgell is our IT manager. And then we'll have Susan Howell as our accounting manager. And then a little later tonight, one of our other ordinances is regarding business licenses, so we have Vicki Adams with us tonight too.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the update. Tough act to follow, but the floor is yours, Mr. Driggers.
I'll give it my best shot. We continue to be very, very proud of this facility, and as you can see, the improvements that we've been able to make to our AV system here. What we want to certainly make sure that we are continuing to provide for our community is a state-of-the-art facility, and we certainly believe that we are continuing to be able to do that. This is a premier venue space for our community. It's an alternative for other types of space that we have in the city, but we certainly now have expanded capabilities, and we're very, very glad to be able to continue to offer that. Those things don't happen freely, so of course, what we are experiencing now are the things that we budgeted a year ago, and we're getting those implemented as we move to the conclusion of this fiscal year. A couple things that we do want to make council aware of. One of those is we are quite aware that we have a policy that we require the installation of sidewalks when there is development, either residential or commercial, in any of our areas. We require that linear sidewalk be placed along the frontage of those properties. We have been advised through SCDOT that it is their policy that they would not allow sidewalk on an SCDOT highway within the highway right-of-way if that sidewalk is not continuous, and to have a termination, a collection, and a termination of that sidewalk. So that is in conflict with our requirement, with our ordinance that sidewalk must be installed. We have been able to work with them to what we believe is a remedy for that situation, and that is that we would offer to them verification that at such time until that sidewalk would be connected or continuous along their route, along their right-of-way route on their highway, that we would assume the responsibility for maintenance of that sidewalk. I have no issue with that whatsoever, because our experience is that SCDOT built sidewalk and they never touch them again. So if they're ever maintained, we have to do that maintenance anyway. So I wanted you to be aware that we are continuing with your policy of requiring the installation of that sidewalk for development of residential and commercial. We are issuing a release to SCDOT, and then we will continue to monitor that, and at such time that we have that full connection, we then would make notice to SCDOT that that sidewalk should be placed back into their system for maintenance. But again, that's not what normally happens anyway, so we really don't anticipate that there will be any change of how we would continue to monitor that, to continue to make repairs, improvements to that. But we do accept some additional liability, because with that being ours for maintenance responsibility, if a person was injured on that sidewalk, then if they are filing a claim for that injury, that claim would be filed against us, not against the state. But again, our experience has been we typically have that responsibility anyway, because the way that system works is that if we ever make a repair to a state-maintained infrastructure, then we assume that responsibility from that point going forward. So what's really happened in essence is that we've had that liability all along anyway. They're just asking for a letter from us now that they're filing that along with their records for that section of highway. Steve Grant has been working very closely with SCDOT on that. Our most recent example is the townhomes that are being built at Brushy Creek and Suber. And so we are requiring installation of sidewalks in that area. The developer was advised by SCDOT that they would not issue the permit unless we issued a letter accepting those sidewalks as our responsibility for maintenance. So I wanted to keep you completely in the loop of how we are handling that. If council believes that we should approach that from any different perspective, we are certainly open to that, and we'll change how we're approaching it. But as of today, we're giving that notice back to them and accepting that responsibility.
Mr. Diggers, I recall a situation where the right-of-way extended a significant amount of distance back from the road, and if I recall, there was as long as the user maintained the right-of-way area, that they could do some, I guess, either parking of vehicles or landscaping or something, and the sidewalk was going to be behind that. Was there any resolution on that issue?
SCDOT still takes the position that the highway right-of-way is theirs, and so they will not issue permission for that to be done. They're just not enforcing. Where we particularly see that is on Highway 29. That is where that is primarily an issue. The particular area that I think you're addressing was in front of one of our automobile dealerships on Highway 29. And, but again, it's they will not issue a permission or approval, but they are not uniformly enforcing that you cannot place anything within their right-of-way. But they could. They reserve the right that they could indeed do that.
So where does that sidewalk typically end up then? Is it outside of their right-of-way or?
Well, typically, we're going to want the sidewalk within the highway right-of-way.
Okay.
Yeah, typically, we're not going to want that sidewalk to go onto private property. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. A couple of other items primarily are some calendar items. One of those is just really recognizing and celebrating the successful employee and family picnic that we celebrated back on June 3rd. It was our highest attended event that we've ever had. It was a wonderful turnout that day. Did it a little bit earlier. We did it a little bit earlier in the season. It wasn't as hot. Worked out wonderfully. I think the mayor even commented we had more children at that event than I think we've ever seen before. So obviously a lot of young families bringing their children and enjoying that. So thank you again for allowing us to continue that event. This was our 17th year of doing that celebration, and it was a wonderful celebration indeed. Our Moonlight Movies continues on Thursday evenings. Crowds are continuing to grow for that. It is a very popular event for us on Thursday evenings here at the park. Greer Market continues to take place on Thursday evenings as well, and it is continuing to draw a good, steady crowd for that event as well over on Randall Street. Our most significant event that will be taking place is my friend to my right, to your left, as we prepare for Freedom Blast. Remember that is Saturday, the 24th of June. We'll be gathering here in the park, music, food, fellowship, and of course, one of the most fabulous fireworks shows that you will see in upstate South Carolina as we would conclude that evening. Freedom Blast has become a most looked forward to event in our community. We keep our focus on recognizing our veterans in our community, and we look forward to that, and we have found that our partnership with our veteran community, that is much appreciated as well. So we look forward to Freedom Blast on the 24th, that's Saturday, coming up here in a few short weeks, and we really hope that you'll be able to join us for that as well. I am conducting a series of employee meetings right now. One of the things that I do each year during budget season is I meet with all of our employees in group settings. I have 9 of those scheduled over the next couple of weeks. I am meeting with them about the budget and the budget process, those things that we would anticipate that we will be able to do as we move forward into our next fiscal year. Again, I find that is a very worthwhile time spent with our employees. I had the first one this morning. And I'm finding that those meetings will typically garner a good bit of questions from our employees about things that are happening, things that they'll be affected by, particularly relative to the budget. And we are continuing to do that. So 8 more of those are scheduled over the next couple of weeks, and really enjoy getting to get out and do that. There are 2 items that I would like council's consideration for in executive session this evening. One of those is a personnel matter involving our administrative department, particularly our finance area, and one is a legal update for council relative to some pending litigation. 1 personnel and 1 legal update. That concludes my report. Certainly glad to answer any questions that we may have at this time. And of course, myself and our staff are always available to council with any inquiry you may have concerning any of our reports or our activity.
Council?
Mr. Driggers, please pass on to the fire department. My neighbor's home burned last Thursday. It was a significant fire. It was a difficult fire to fight, but they did an outstanding job, and there's not many departments that would have done what they've done. So they did a great job.
Very good. They were on that scene for a while, so I will certainly make sure that's communicated to them. Thank you.
Mr. Driggers, can we conclude that Mr. Owens had something to do with that cardboard cutout, since it bears such a striking resemblance?
I was going to say, Mr. Owens posed for that cutout, yes. Yes.
I assume so.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make note of that. He's in there doing a little happy dance right there. Council, we'll move to items of new business this evening, the first of which is the first and final reading of Resolution 8, number 2017. This is a resolution allowing the City of Greer to continue the cooperative agreement with the County of Greenville and Greenville County Redevelopment Authority in order to obtain urban county status with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Mr. Stan Wilson, who is the Executive Director of the Greenville County Redevelopment Authority, joins us this evening. Sir, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor, Council. I want to thank you for this opportunity. The resolution before you is a continuation of an existing agreement that we've had for a number of years. It's a requirement by the U.S. Department of HUD, and what it does, it allows the City of Greer to receive homes, CDBG, and emergency solution grant dollars. And I want to say we've enjoyed a wonderful relationship, and we thank Mr. Driggers and his staff. So this is part of a process with HUD to continue that agreement between 2018 to 2020. So it's part of that requirement. And I'll certainly answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Are you going to be able to assure us that those funds are going to be available through 2020?
I'm going to tell you that I will do my best to keep you updated.
Fair enough. Council, any questions? Mr. Wilson, we thank you for the work that you do. As you are aware, and possibly some folks in here as well too, it is a long-standing relationship that we've had with the Greenville County Redevelopment Authority. They do a lot of work in not only in our community, but within the communities within our community, and really has helped improve the quality of life in several of the areas, and we look forward to that continuing relationship. Y'all address and touch so many different areas that it's hard to quantify your work sometimes, other than to say that we are a better city for the work that you do, and appreciate the guidance and direction and insight of those that were on that board that helped lead us to a program of reinvestment some number of years ago, because that has served us well. So thank you for helping continue to monitor and to move us along in that direction.
Thank you, and I'll pass it on to everybody.
All right. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Council, I'll entertain a motion to receive.
No motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Floor is open for discussion. Comments? Questions? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. First and final reading of Resolution number 9-2017, a resolution to accept Heatherfield subdivision streets, namely Heatherwood Lane and Maiden Court, into the City of Greer street system. Mr. Grant, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Heatherwood subdivision was permitted in March of 2015, and construction began soon after that. It consisted of a little over 1,700 feet of road and 73 lots. City staff has monitored the construction of this project throughout, and the roads are constructed, as you can see in this picture, and close to half of the lots are built upon. The developers requested that these streets be brought into the city, and city staff has inspected the streets and found them to be in good condition, and therefore staff recommends that Heatherwood Lane, approximately 1,695 feet, and Maiden Court, approximately 125 feet, be accepted into the city for operation, ownership, and maintenance.
For the purposes of discussion, do I hear a motion to receive?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Floor is open. Questions of staff? Comments? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Have the first reading of ordinance number 16-2017, an ordinance to change the zoning classification of properties owned by Her Will LLC located on Palmer Street from RM1 to C2. This comes to us for first reading this time. So, Ms. McCormick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Danner. Good evening, members of council. We have an ordinance for a rezoning of two properties from RM1 to C2 commercial. These two parcels are to become part of All-Star Storage. The business fronts on Highway 14 or Main Street, and these parcels are kind of internal in that block, and it's part of a larger expansion that they have been doing as they accumulate parcels as they come up for sale in that area. Simple rezoning request. That's all I have right now.
By show of hand, is the owner of the property or a representative of the owner of the property with us this evening? Would you like to address council?
If there are questions.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Floor is open for questions of staff or of the owners. Hearing none, Ms. Duncan.
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. We have the first reading of ordinance number 17-2017, an ordinance to change the zoning classification of property owned by Steve Sandler located at 9 Inglesby Street from PD to DRD. Ms. McCormick?
Thank you, Mayor Danner. This is an interesting development. The planned development that is currently located there is in the floodplain and has not been developed in this area. And we have an interesting concept of a DRD design review district called Net Zero Farm. It's an off-the-grid development of 19 single-family residences that are complete with organic gardens. They're going to do hydroponic farming. And Planning Commission was very excited to see this interesting opportunity and is interested in this concept. They did recommend approval, and I'll be glad to share the site plan with you so that way you can see how they are going to lay this out.
By show of hand, is the owner of the property or representative of the owner of the property with us this evening? Let the record show no one indicated so. Entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
We now have a motion and a second. Ms. McCormick, I'd hope maybe someone from the development would be with us this evening. Do you have any additional information regarding the homes, both in terms of size and construction and that sort of thing?
Yes, sir. They are going to be between 800 and 1,500 square feet. They're single flats, and then they have two-story units. They are completely off the grid. They will not be using CPW utilities. They're going to not even install electric lines, solar panels, and they're kind of a modern concept. They do have carports, no garages, and the hydroponic farming is on the western side of the property, and all of the owners in this development will be expected to participate in the farming process in this community.
Let's see, there'll be sewer, water, and possibly gas then?
That's correct. They will have an electrical backup system if there are solar panels or it doesn't stay sunny for a while, where they will have solar cell batteries that can be generated, but they'll be running off of generators. We heard testimony to that effect at the Planning Commission meeting.
Is the only entrance going to be off of Inglesby?
Yes, Mr. Bettis. They will have two entrance drives off Inglesby, and they did request at Planning Commission to have those be as gravel driveways. It has been reviewed by Fire Marshal and our engineering department. As long as they meet compaction tests and weight, they can do that.
Is this a model that they're following? Is there another example of a development like this somewhere in another city or somewhere close by?
Not in the United States. That was a question that Planning Commission had for the applicant and developer. They're modeling after some European-style development in this regard, but there's nothing in the United States that's developed that they were aware of or could speak to at this time.
What does the architecture look like on the houses?
It's pretty modern, flat roofs, wood, hardy plank siding.
Will we be responsible, will we take the road into our inventory and have to maintain
No, these will be private roads.
private roads?
So there'll be no additional lighting in terms of street lighting or any other lighting for public safety issues in that area?
They're not proposing any freestanding lighting, which is a variance that they did ask for at the Planning Commission. They're proposing just lighting on the residences themselves.
Are they doing composting so we don't have to give garbage service?
Correct. They do have composting, and we did note that any composting areas have to be screened from public view. This is a pretty densely populated area, so just to ensure that that wasn't an eyesore or nose sore, perhaps.
Have they pre-sold these, or is this just speculative, or how's this development going to unfold?
They have not pre-sold at this point. They have to receive final development plan approval before they're allowed to sell any. That's a state law. And as such, they have not been able to. They are marketing, they say successfully. They have a lot of people interested in this development, but no actual sales at this point. They're looking to start in August. Start selling in August.
So would we allow a gravel walk to substitute for a sidewalk?
They have requested no sidewalks as part of their review from the Planning Commission, but were allowed to do that within the development, but I believe the Planning Commission is expecting them to put sidewalks on Inglesby Street.
Are they working with a specific builder? Are they going to... They are?
Mark Clayton is the developer builder.
Okay, he's doing both.
Correct.
Okay.
Steve Sandlin is selling the property to Mr. Clayton, his development company.
Isn't there a creek down there somewhere?
There is a creek. Most of this property is in the floodplain.
That's what I thought.
Go back to the sidewalk. You said that they are requiring him to put it on Inglesby, which is the front of the property. What about the interior?
They have a detail, and I'll be glad to pass this around again, community walking trails throughout the development that are see them, they're kind of meandering through. They are proposing that those be mulch to keep with the natural feel, and they don't want to do concrete or any aggregate in that area. Planning Commission did accept that as a proposed alternative to sidewalks. This backs up somewhat to Century Park. If you go way down and look at the creek, and connects over sort of to where across the street, Jones Avenue, which ties into Inglesby, there's another development going on that we've just approved in the past 2 months there. They want to connect and do some sort of walking trail from that development to this development and eventually tie in down to where Century Park is.
The issue I have about the sidewalks is, does that set a precedent for other subdivisions?
As a design review district, certainly it's within your purview to make changes or allow exceptions. However, it's not necessarily a requirement that they are allowed to not have sidewalks. It's certainly within your right to require that they be put back in.
Isn't the intent of this community to be a low-impact community? I mean, it's net zero is what their goal is. So I'm guessing that's why they're trying to use more natural materials and...
Correct. And it being in the floodplain, it's a little bit more amenable to do natural development and not do paving and concrete in that flood area.
Concrete is very natural. It is. It's cement and aggregate.
Yeah.
And water, so it's all.
Maybe it's more permanent than what they're going.
Sure.
I'm afraid this sets a precedent for anybody else who says, because it's a whole lot cheaper to grade out the path and put some mulch in.
Did you say all their driveways are going to be gravel? Is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, the roads are gravel.
Hard to foresee this. Certainly different. The roads.
Our private road standard would allow for that as long as they meet all the requirements of a private road. It's a little bit different.
So is there a homeowners association? How do they maintain these large common areas in the area where the floodplain is and in the area along the creek?
They did talk about their homeowners' dues being somewhere in the $100 to $150 a month range, dependent upon the size of the unit. They will not be expected to pay individual utilities in that regard. It's part of the whole concept, and then an agreement to work in the garden and work the raised beds and be part of the hydroponic farming system there. It's kind of buying into a communal living type
Just wonder how.
facility.
How,
So that's how they'll re-gravel the roads and all the other things that need to be taken care of, re-mulch
Correct.
the paths and whatnot. And since it's a private road,
No trash collection.
no trash collection, no,
And we've been down that road once before about private roads and no trash collection.
yeah.
They came to PAC meeting and we discussed with them, mainly, obviously, emergency services was our, critical thinking point about the roads. And Mr. Keeley, who is here, also gave comments that the fire hydrants obviously have to be installed and in service before construction permits are released. And all weather roads have to be installed before construction, and those private gravel drives have to be maintained at all times. So that's something that we'll have to keep on looking at.
So if the homeowner association is defunct and the gravel road going in gets beyond what we believe is acceptable, then how is that enforced? For them, if there is no homeowner association, how do we enforce that?
That's a difficult question. We have this issue in this, maybe not necessarily in the city, but it is an issue for municipalities and counties across South Carolina when homeowner associations go, or property owner associations living on private roads, and then emergency services are needed. I can recall from some previous places of employment, dirt roads are very common, and it's hard when you have, it's hard for a truck to get in, let alone an ambulance or a fire truck to go down those types of facilities. So that's why the variance was required from the Planning Commission. And they did find, with it being a natural, as Mr. Dumas was describing, their goal, they did allow them to do that. However, that is a concern.
The challenge with it is that it's a collective thing, and so you have to have a commitment from several people in order to put this infrastructure in place, and if you don't have that, then there's honestly no reason to even start the project.
is that a 100-year floodplain that they're building there? I just can't imagine anybody wanting to buy a house that's in a floodplain.
Yes, ma'am. It's a 100-year floodplain. It comes up, not exactly where the houses are located, but all of the common area, all of the driveway area. The houses are just right outside of it. I think we'd see
They're
more than
outside.
19 if it were not in the floodplain.
And how many homes did you say would be going in there?
19 single-family
19. Okay.
residences.
I heard you say 19 then, but I just want to make sure that was related to the house.
Yes, ma'am.
Other
Sounds more
questions,
like
comments?
Pennsylvania or someplace.
Why are we shifting from the PD to the DRD? Why is there a request for that?
The plan development was kind of left over from the plan development that's in front of it. This was the common area for that, which has never been used or developed. And I guess it went to tax sale. Mr. Sandlin acquired it, and now he's selling it to someone else. That's a common problem with common area as well. Kind of the homeowners association falls into disarray and then it gets sold at a tax sale. It's not useful for anything other than something like this, perhaps.
So there's no, since it backs up to other residents along both those streets, there's no requirement then for buffering between the two?
Just a 25-foot perimeter buffer. And of course, any of the hydroponic farming or composting will have to be screened from public view, but the residences will not have to be screened. It's a very wooded area right now.
Ms. Duncan, we have a motion and a second.
Yes.
Others?
Well, I have a question then. This ordinance is just to change it to DRD. What about the sidewalk issue? How is that addressed?
As part of the design review district, it's like a separate zoning ordinance. In essence, they're asking, they fill out this, paper and give us a plan and tell us they don't want to do certain things that are normally required as part of a subdivision. And as part of that, it's its own zoning ordinance for this piece of property. So if council elects to approve the DRD as requested, they won't be required to have sidewalks paved. They can do the mulch. They wouldn't be required to put them on Inglesby Street, but they can do the gravel driveways. It's whatever they design, basically. It's almost an agreement between council and the developer.
So if we approve the DRD, they do not have to do the sidewalks.
Correct, unless you want to amend their request and make them do them. You can do that.
They wouldn't have to do the interior sidewalk, but they'd have to do the exterior, would they not? Or are we exempting them for both?
No, we're exempting them from the concrete sidewalks on the interior.
Yeah.
And they're going to use, it's going to be a path.
Yeah.
They will have to.
We could amend it and go back and.
Well, that's right. Just there's only one entrance at Inglesby, so they're not doing exterior sidewalks, really, then, are they?
It's a short little piece. It's
Just a
very
little
small
piece.
road frontage on Inglesby.
Yeah.
They will have to come back through Planning Commission for a final development plan to really detail these design elements. But that will not come back to council. So this is your opportunity, if you'd like to make changes to the development, to do so.
I appreciate the point about the precedent it sets, but if indeed the interior is private roads and they're going to be gravel, I'm not sure that trying to force them to do concrete sidewalks is any advantage to anybody at that point.
Well, my question was not so much an advantage to anyone, it's what does it open up for us in the future if we have a developer who comes in and says, my roads want to be private. And so we will do the exterior sidewalks, but the interior, we don't want them concrete. We want to make a path. So does this lock us into it, or can it be challenged?
I don't think so.
I don't think if it's private that it locks us in any way, because I don't think if it's private road and private property that's, as long as the exterior meets our codes, I don't see that it makes that much difference on the interior.
Well, on the interior though, on standard subdivision, that's private property, and we require those.
But that puts pressure, if they left the roads gravel and the sidewalks mulch, that puts pressure on Lee to find people that are willing to move into that development. That's not just everybody wants to live in a place like that. That's going to be the challenge here. I don't know who their target audience is, but that'll be interesting to see who lives there.
I think that this is just specific to this particular project in that it's the kind of the field that they're going for. I don't think it sets a precedent for us moving forward. Maybe when it comes to dealing with projects like this, we can look back on this project and see if it was a success, and maybe that was a great idea, or maybe it wasn't. But I don't think we've seen this.
It may turn out to be
maybe great,
something really good.
I don't know. But it is
We
kind
might
of,
have a 100-year flood and it all get washed
Yeah,
out.
and the floods have been coming rapidly.
so what makes me more curious is that no other communities that we're aware of have engaged in a project like this locally, and that we're kind of taking the risk, if you will, if the closest comparator is in Europe.
Greenville County and the city of Greenville has some low-impact development, but they're not completely off the grid, and they're typically in a more condominium, multifamily style. Off of Stone Avenue, they have some development, I think it's Earthwise homes, that look and feel like this, but it's not exactly like this.
So, well, answer me this. When they sell a home, will that deed have a restriction that says you cannot bring electricity into the home via the CPW or grid or whatever? Because they may sell out the first round, but then somebody moves out and they go in and, well, I will power from CPW.
That's a really interesting question. I don't know specifically the answer to that. I know at the PAC meeting, they said they didn't want electricity. There wouldn't be, electricity lines wouldn't be run, and CPW said if you don't do it at the beginning, you're not getting them ever. So that's kind of nailing the coffin shut for them in that regard. But deed restrictions, I don't know the answer to that question.
I think that's typically their policy. If it doesn't go in on the front end, they won't run it, and they're going to do it.
Well, I just go back to the fact that we said no garbage pickup on private roads. And that was fine in the beginning. After time, reestablishment of, or new owners came in, they didn't like that. Put pressure on council, and council changed that. So, you know, we have paths that are in a floodplain. They get it put in, it becomes a flood, washes that away. Now they're putting pressure on Riley because it's in his district. I want you to, come fix my sidewalks. I want you to do something. They've got a teenage kid out there in the gravel driveway. He's spinning the tires in and out, throwing gravel in the yards. I mean, I don't know. I just think there's some issues that, and then, well, okay, no, we're not going to have power going to the homes, and then have somebody, now, I want power. Now, CPW, that might be what they say, but that's not their policy. And all it takes is the change in leadership, and they drop a line to it. And I don't know what that causes for anybody, but
I don't think there'd be any pressure on me. As long as I can keep the entrance on Inglesby open, they're good. They're on their own,
Mayor, members of council, there is another piece of this property up in the corner that they did not originally submit as part of a rezoning that's not in the city. So the second driveway is going to have to come back before you for first reading for annexation and zoning to DRD. So there's an opportunity for you to address. We'll make sure that they are in attendance at that meeting if you have more questions of them at that time.
Is that on Inglesby or Jones?
It's on Inglesby as well.
Okay, that will be.
There's a little
Cul-de-sac.
anvil-shaped looking piece of property that was not part of this rezoning that they didn't realize until after the fact was not in the city.
Interesting. Others? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Aaron Wood,
we've got a second reading we held on this, correct? Because it's just.
Yes, for this first reading.
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
No. First reading of ordinance, thank you. Was here. Oh, she's. First reading of ordinance number 18-2017. This is the City of Greer budget ordinance for fiscal year 2017-2018. It's an ordinance relating to the fiscal affairs of the City of Greer, South Carolina, making appropriations, therefore levying taxes, and to provide for an effective date. You have the link to the documents, maybe the documents with you this evening. We have had a workshop in that regard. This comes to you as first reading for the purpose of discussion. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Floor is open for discussion. We will ask that the administrator or the financial department give us any new updates, any new information, or a brief recap if they desire. Otherwise, the floor will be open for discussion.
Mayor and Council, if I may, I will call your attention as a follow-up to our workshop. I have included a transmittal letter that is attached to this item. I will spare you reading that letter to you, but its attempt is to highlight those significant changes and the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish in the budget. It is intended to be a summary document, but that is provided for your information. The transmittal letter has been posted to our website along with the budget documents as well as the budget ordinance and the fee schedule. The only item that we have contained in your package that we have not previously covered is the comprehensive fee schedule, and I've asked Mr. Seifert if he would provide us with some additional information on that this evening so that we have all information for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Driggers and Mayor and Council. For the comprehensive fee schedule, this is the annual opportunity that we take as a city and as departments to review the fee schedule and make any requested and proposed amendments as part of the budget. In reviewing the fee schedule, there are a number of text changes and deletions, and I can, at your direction, I have a few highlights to hit that are just major changes, or if you wish, we can cover every change.
Hit the high spots.
High spots. I can do that.
Because we did include strike-throughs and additional information, so we tried to make sure that it was clear what those changes would be.
Right.
Correct. Each change is either a strike-through or a bold and underline for additions. The first substantive change will be on page 2. Down at the bottom, there is the whole section related to rezoning fees being presented by the Building Development Standards Department puts us in line with Greenville County. So we'll be, they are not identical. The lower ranges are identical. Some of the other ranges, the higher ranges in that table are a little less. Because the differential between the steps in Greenville County were not identical steps. We made ours identical, so the higher ranges are a little less, but it does put us in line with Greenville County. And then moving to page 5, we have 2 new fees being proposed from the Finance Department. One is a credit card convenience fee of 3%. That is something that we have absorbed as a city since we started accepting credit cards, and it used to not be substantial amounts of money. This past year, we have absorbed $65,000 in credit card fees, and
Will that cover that?
yes, sir, it will. That 3% is our average fee per transaction. Below that is the fees for replying to Freedom of Information Act requests. The previous fee was 10 cents per page plus the employee time doing the research. The state law on that changed just recently in the last couple weeks, and we have been a little more generous than the law, that we are now allowing the first 2 hours of research time at no charge, and the additional time beyond 2 hours will be at a $15 per hour rate. And then the third fee change in that little section is the refund processing fee. In this with all the storm damage and construction growth that we're experiencing right now, we have had quite a number of permits and contractors coming in and requesting permits, and then they change their mind, or there's some error or some other something that happens in that permit, and they're requesting refunds. And the time spent for all of our clerks and for the permit technicians and the building development staff to review those, to approve them, and then to take the time to turn around and refund it, we're requesting that we institute a $25 refund processing fee to accommodate for that time spent on those items. And then moving to page 9, this is in the recreation fee section. This is relative to the hourly rate for security officers provided by our police department. This amount is being requested to be increased from $25 per hour to $35 per hour, again, to put us in line with surrounding agencies. And this rate is also mimicked in the police department section of the fee schedule. Again, it is going from $25 to $35 per hour, and the police department has requested that this go into effect January 1st, and that gives us time to provide notice to all of the agencies that are currently in agreement with the city using our officers for that. And then the last one is on page 10 and 11. The Recreation Department has requested their pricing for the Cannon Center be updated. As it stands currently, the Cannon Center will seat more people than this facility, but is at a lower rate. So that facility down there is really kind of undercutting this facility for bigger crowds. So we are requesting that the fees for Cannon Center be equivalent to the fees for all 3 sections of the event halls here at City Hall. And those are all of the substantive changes.
Council floor is open for discussion.
In regard to fees in general, I understand that we need to be responsible to our bottom line, to our taxpayers and our citizens. But sometimes, and I'm not saying us, but agencies, governmental agencies, they will want to make every attempt to, if they have 4 major functions of whatever their entity is, they'll want to make each one of those self-sustainable. And that should be great, and that should be your goal if you are a for-profit enterprise. But if you're taking in dollars and you're not for-profit, and you are continuing to build your reserve fund, then I think that all fees that we need to look at is, well, why? Is this something that is this something that maybe an example could be if we had only people outside the city use the credit card system to pay. Well, I could see charging that because our citizens are footing that extra bill. But I don't know if that makes any sense, what the message I'm trying to convey, but I think in all fees, we need to look in that direction. I'm not saying anything against any fee at this point. It's just that we need to be mindful of that. We're not here to make a dollar. We're here to manage the city.
I think we would agree as a group. I mean, it's one of the things that came up in the discussion at the workshop was was the fact that as our reserve continues to grow, at what point do we, is enough enough? And I think it's been pointed out tonight that, while that discussion is certainly valid, we do know that we've got a number of extraordinary circumstances that are going to require that we address those financially, and this may be an opportunity to use some of those funds to help us lower the cost on the front end, and so that is going to deplete that reserve some. But I know Riley made a point at the workshop about, we need to continue to monitor those ways of making sure that our citizens see the best value for their dollar, while those on the outside may not be able to enjoy the same types of things. But there's also a very valid discussion about the fact that our stormwater fee hadn't increased in a number of years, and that we now lag behind in terms of being relative to some of the other areas. And I'm not sure that our intent in setting that fee where it was to make sure that we offered our citizens a good value. But I think at some point in time you've got, particularly on an enterprise fund like that, to realize that there may be opportunity or need for us to look to adjust that. We also got some information from the administrator that, this is absolutely going to be probably the last year of where we are on the garbage service side of things, and we're going to need to look at increasing that. So I think it's always a balancing act of, what we take in and what goes out. And I'm sure there's lots of creative ways to address that. But others?
That's a good point. You brought up the stormwater fee, if you want to talk about it. Even if we raise it from $21.60 to $25, that's not a lot of money that it's going to generate by my calculations. Is that correct?
It's per ERU.
Right. I think we determined it was, I hate to throw a number out there because I don't remember.
My calculation was about $25,000.
No.
If we did it over 12,000 parcels, and that's a minimum number at only one ERU, that would generate about 40,000. So it's going to be
households.
That's households.
Yeah.
So that would be at one ERU. Then when you look at your commercial and industrial properties, we would have to come back and take a look, but I think that number is in the 80, 90,000.
I was thinking 75, 125, something like that.
So that would affect commercial properties too?
Yes, it does.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, it does. Because the 2160 is per equivalent residential unit. That's that per ERU.
Right.
For you and me, that's a lot. And that's 2160. But for a commercial business, Belk, Target, Home Depot, an industry, it is their roof, parking, based on the acreage that they have. And those are affected a little differently. The percentage would be the same. The percentage increase doesn't change, but the dollar amount would change, obviously.
Right.
What's the balance of that fund right now?
That one is at about $900,000, and we have about $350,000 earmarked for renovating down at the recycle center. And then there are other projects out there that Mr. Grant is working on that will easily deplete
That 900,000, that's been steadily increasing over the years.
As we prepare to do some larger projects. And of course, that is my biggest concern, is that as we do, a single project at $350,000 or a new parking lot that could take $150,000, $175,000, we will deplete $900,000 very quickly. And that is indeed where my concern has been at 2160, and the number of projects that we are now preparing for. We will deplete those reserves very quickly, and then to be able to replace that would take as many years to try to get back to the same level. And so you can look at the budget, last year's budget for stormwater as compared to this year's budget for stormwater. Projects have decreased. The allocation of resource to do projects relative to stormwater, that is a lower amount in this year's budget than it was in prior year's budget, because other expenses associated with stormwater have increased as well. So when we look at just those recurring costs, over time, those recurring costs have increased. The cost of managing that program, staff resources, that which is required to implement the mandated program, as those costs have increased, the only thing that we've been able to rely on has been the incremental increase in the number of properties. And it's not a match. It just doesn't match. And while I believe that we can operate this year at the amount that I've indicated, it is noteworthy that it is less than we operated on last year for that same fund. And that's why I'm saying, whether now or as you continue to work through this year, I believe that it is inevitable that council needs to consider an adjustment to that 2160 ERU. My recommendation would be that would go to the $25 per ERU whenever that decision needs to be made, because we will still be in line with the remainder of the county. The fees would not be any higher here than they would be outside of the municipality.
Have y'all run that number? Apparently not, to see what that comes out to.
Well, we have run some of those numbers. Steve, I'm not sure if Steve has calculated that on what we're submitting to the county. We had some preliminary numbers. We just didn't present it because we didn't recommend it in the budget. We certainly can. We can give you a finite number.
And that doesn't have to be part of the budget, does it?
Well, the ERU, it's established under your comprehensive fee schedule. We try to recommend that you adopt your fee schedule at the same time that you do the budget. That goes in with our county taxes, and if the council were to make a decision post the budget, it would simply amend the stormwater budget. It would not have any effect to the general fund or any of the other budgets. It would only apply to that.
I'd be interested to see the numbers if you want to put that together.
And we certainly can do that, and we can have that obviously for you as you would consider second reading, and if you chose to amend at second reading, you certainly could do that.
Well, I felt for a number of years that fee probably, it's kind of like our property taxes. It's stayed stable, and we haven't as a city,
No.
And that can get you in trouble.
Yeah, it's one of those, it has to operate as an enterprise because it's set as a separate fee, and we've not needed to increase it because we've been banking to do larger projects. When we do those projects, we will deplete our resources.
I'd be interested to see the numbers for next time.
We can do that, certainly.
I think there's a valid argument to be made there, not that I'm advocating or not for a raise in the stormwater fee. I think legitimately we could, and it may be appropriate to do. I think one of the things we've got to remember is that while none of us relish the idea of raising taxes or fees or any of those things, we have to be long-sighted in terms of our approach to this. I think one of the things that often trips municipalities and even companies up is just for the sake of not having to address that, continuing to put things off, and what happens is it'll ultimately put you in a position where you're forced in some regards to make large increases. And while I'm again never relish the idea of adjusting the fees, I would certainly rather do it in smaller increments on some sort of steady basis than push it back and have to make a large one at one time. And, I think we saw a recent example that I mentioned to Mr. Bettis where we had, where a small municipality in the lower part of the state had given up their, the elected officials had given up their salary to help offset the increase in the retirement benefit plan. And I thought, that really is sort of short-sighted, because it only temporarily cures an ill and it doesn't improve anything. So as we consider not only this budget but some of the others, I think we need to keep in mind that there is something to be said for staying abreast of where we need to be on some of these items. Others? This is first reading, and certainly can take action between or at second reading if we get additional information. Other questions or comments?
On the revenue side, on the state aid,
Yes, sir.
now, we're proposing $246,000. We have been cutting that, correct?
10% each year. Yes, sir. We take 10% off of the projected revenue stream, and then we'll take our actual and we use that for non-recurring capital.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so last year, is that right? No, yes. What was our receipts? Actually, was 441.
Or can you reference the page number you're looking on?
That's 4.
4.
No, that's 50.
That's right.
It is 4.
Pardon?
It is 4.
So what did we actually receive last year?
We received, for fiscal year 16, the state aid line is $441,000, and then the excess below it is the $117,000. Those two numbers added together is the amount we're receiving from the state.
Okay, and we budgeted 273.
With the difference shifting down to the excess line.
Okay, so that means that instead of preparing, the intention of setting off that 10% was to, because we know in hard times the state's going to pull that money.
Or even not hard.
Yeah.
We're just trying to methodically lessen our dependence on that state aid.
Well, then the state aid excess, you're still putting that in projected revenue.
We are putting in a projected revenue, but we're earmarking it only for non-recurring capital.
Okay. On another revenue issue is, we've talked about the recession and how we've progressed, and I agree with you, and I've said it before, that the city is financially stronger than it's ever been in its history. We went through some very lean and tough times, and everybody that is involved in the city really, everybody tightened their belts, did a great job, and we are where we are today because of everybody, including our property tax payers. 2 mills of that tax increase was dedicated to the reserve fund. And I think and the reason we did that is that we had depleted that fund because we were using it in tough times. But now we're beyond that 35%, we're at 44% of budget, So I think that we need to be looking at a rollback of those 2 mills.
Well, in the workshop, one of the things that we discussed is a rollover of those 2 mills, and I think there was some discussion I overheard earlier about that. As you're aware, the state retirement system has increased our contribution fairly significantly over the next number of years, including what was to be a 2% increase this year. Now, the legislature has set aside a pot of money that would be distributed towards that amount to be distributed among the municipalities that will equate to approximately 1%. But we're still going to have an increase that's going to take place over the next
5 years.
5 years.
2022.
So what we have done in this particular budget is dedicate that millage to offset that cost of the increase in the retirement
Well,
cost.
I have to disagree with that because the original thinking behind that 2 mills was to get it back up, and then at least my thinking was, and I mentioned this to council before, that we need to roll that back. We rewarded folks that got us through that. Financially, we've rewarded them with other non-financial, I guess, gifts, however you want to quote it. But we never have rewarded our citizens who paid that. And I think it's time to say our fund is where it is because of you, and now we're going to reward you those 2 meals.
Well, that increase is our share. The employees are going to be paying their share of it as well, too.
No, I understand that.
So, I mean, if we roll that back, then it's a matter of finding other places to cut to replace that, because we've got an investment this year of how much?
For
In the increase in the retirement fund at the 2%.
$211,000 is what we budgeted.
So $211,000 that will be our piece of that, and then there'll be a match from the employees as well too. So it's just a matter of shifting dollars.
Well, I want to stick to what I said in the very beginning when we did this back in 2009. That those 2 mills were dedicated for that. It's back to where it is beyond where auditors want it to be, and I think we should reward their citizens for that 2 mil decrease. And I understand about the state retirement. I mean, all the other things that come down from the state, because they refuse to acknowledge reality, and they will not, they don't want to do, they shift it to someone else. But at some point we need to prove the naysayers wrong, that when we say we're going to use this fund, these tax dollars to do this and do this only, they say, yeah, it's on there, it's not coming off. And, that's not what my intention was when I voted for that millage increase.
Would you draw it down off the reserve fund, or would you cut it out of the budget and leave the reserve fund alone?
No, I mean, those 2 mills are going to the reserve fund.
Not in this budget.
Yeah, but that's where they've been going.
That's where they've been, yes, sir.
They've been going. And how do you change the ordinance? Because doesn't the ordinance read that those 2 mills are dedicated to that reserve fund? Is that ordinance changed in this document?
It is.
Okay.
to reduce 2 mills off of the revenue side, we would need to either transfer in $234,000, or we would need to cut expenses by $234,000.
Other discussion in that same vein? Have a motion and a second on the floor for,
Let me ask one more question. That 211,000, is that figuring at 1% or 2%?
It's figured at 2%.
Okay.
And because we have indeed been notified that the state legislature, through the House version of the bill, their intent is that they would fund directly to PIBA 1% of that 2% increase. That is the budget that was approved. Now, there are some still pieces of legislation. The governor will obviously veto certain portions of the budget. The House and the Senate will have to come back and they'll have to deal with those vetoes, and then they'll have to make any last amendments. So we still don't know definitively that that is absolute, because we've got to go through that process. If indeed the 1% is funded directly to PIBA, that 211 would be cut in half. Because we've known that, my recommendation to council would be that we would hold that 1% right where it is, simply because we know that we are indeed going to get a request for renegotiation on our sanitation fee. We've been told that that's coming. We know that that's coming. We just don't know what that amount is going to be. My recommendation would be that that's a placeholder. Even if we didn't have it, I still wasn't proposing that we make any type of increase, because it's an unknown. And when we have an unknown, I just don't want to propose a revenue adjustment for an unknown. But I would have no reservations in earmarking an expense for what could be an additional expense in the budget, because it will affect this year, but it's an enterprise fund. It will not affect our general fund. It will affect the sanitation garbage fund. And I believe that we would ultimately have a negative if we have to make an adjustment in mid-year. We would go over budget in that particular fund. This would give you a place that you could subsidize that deficit.
Well, I agree with Mr. Arrowood. I think we should always be looking for ways to reward the taxpayer. And I think we've done that by not raising our millage for a number of years now. I'm not so sure that this is a good time with the question marks about retirement. I mean, everybody's getting hit with that. I'm not so sure this is the right time to change our millage right now for that, and a number of reasons. I agree with everything you say. I'm just not sure this is exactly the right time to change it.
Well, we had some discussion, very brief tonight, about major projects and dollars that we're going to need to expend for those. But it raises the question, and this is nothing new for me, that if we do something, if it's ours, we need to be able to maintain it. When we built this, we had to increase the dollars for just grounds maintenance, and it shows. But we don't maintain things that are here. Sidewalks, we have sidewalks that are in dire need of repair or replacement. So,
and I would rather see us dedicate 2 mills a year to sidewalk repair than to reduce them. That's a lot of sidewalk.
but it still doesn't get, this, anyway.
I know what you're saying. It still doesn't reduce the tax burden.
think the one thing we've got to keep in mind as well too, and I mean this isn't just a one-time adjustment. We've got a continuing increase for how many more years on the retirement fund?
1% a year till 2022.
So we've got we've got a number of years yet to go with an increase of 1% over that next 5 or 6 years. So it's always about, and I think you make a very valid point, it's always about value. And at this point, I think we've got a budget that gives us and our citizens a real value in terms of what they get. Can we slice it and dice it a different way? We can. I think we do our best to make sure that our citizens are getting those bang for their buck, and I think we've got a good budget at this point. Others? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
No.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert, yes. Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, we've got the first reading of ordinance 19-2017, an ordinance amending Chapter 18, Business License, Article 2, Licensing, Section 18 through 52 to reflect changes in the North America Industry Classification System Numerical Index. Mr. Seifert.
Again, thank you, Mayor and Council. We are following the model ordinance as prepared by the Municipal Association for our business license ordinance that we administer here in the city. As you're aware, that is based on what we call the NAICS code, the North American Industry Classification System, that was created and prepared and maintained by the Internal Revenue Service. Each year, they take the tax information for all the taxpayers across the nation and amend the classification of all those businesses based on their profitability. Those indexes are then incorporated into our business license ordinance. So to maintain the legal integrity of our ordinance for business licenses, we have to occasionally, regularly, take those indexes into account so that the ordinance as a whole cannot be invalidated. So we have not taken these indexes and modified our ordinance to amend them for these indexes in 4 years, I believe, since 2014 going into 2015, so it'll be 3 years. And this is an important time for us to do this, and it gets us ready for the new state law that we've been working on for 2 years that will require all municipalities to adopt these indexes every 2 years. So it gets us in line and prepared for that as we're moving forward with that state law.
Mr. Seifert, let me ask what I would assume to be a leading question, because I believe I know the answer to it. But for clarification, the adjustments can indeed cause an increase or a decrease to business license revenue with all things being equal.
Correct.
But I'm not talking about
business.
No additional business, not new sales or any of that. But all things being equal, if sales for all businesses were identical in the next fiscal year to this year, what would be the effect of this change?
For the, as you're leading into with this, some businesses go up, some businesses go down. On the whole, we stand to have a decrease in business license revenue, and that effect for this year that is incorporated in the budget is about $145,000.
And to that point, that $145,000 has been adjusted for in our projections for overall business license revenue for 2017-18. Because we know that we are experiencing growth. We will receive this year more than we budgeted for this year, but we have accounted for that overall potential loss within this budget. It is accounted for.
So the IRS data is based on their changes are based on political maneuvering, or they're based on facts?
It's supposed to be based on facts. It is supposed to be based on a statistical analysis for the ability of certain classes of business to make a profit.
So if overall our rate's going to drop some, our take is going to drop some, that means the IRS is saying that certain businesses are not as profitable as they used to be?
That could be the case, that some are not as profitable, but it could also be that certain class of businesses, that we are affected in a way because of the number of businesses or the types of businesses that we have, which may be different from a community somewhere else, because they're doing it nationwide. And so to keep that integrity, the legal integrity of the system, we are impacted. We could be impacted positively or negatively. In this particular case, the overall impact could be a negative $145,000 in its sum, but our anticipated growth outweighs that. Yes, sir. And that's one of the reasons that we like to do this at this time of year, because we can account for it in the budget versus mid-year.
I'm just wondering if there are other influences that might have gotten these changed. Yeah, I'm such a pessimist.
David,
But the standard answer, perhaps.
Not reading too much into that politically, the IRS statistics are 3 years old by the time we adopt them.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
So the 2017 indexes that we're adopting are on 2014 taxes.
Wow.
David, the rate class, it's not progressive. Like if you're at class 1, you don't pay less than class. Does it move up?
It is progressive. Yes.
Oh, it is.
Yes,
So
sir.
if you're at the higher number, you're going to pay a higher rate of tax.
In comparison, like if you're in a rate 7, which is our highest rate in the rate structure, you will pay more on the same revenue than somebody in a rate 1.
Okay.
But it's not significant. There's, between classes, there's a $5, is it 5, Vicki, or 10? For the base rate between classes, it's $5. So, but if it's $5 between each class as a base, and then 10 cents per thousand is the difference per class. So between rate 1 and rate 7, you're only talking 60 cents or $30
Okay. Gotcha.
on a per thousand basis.
So hearkening back to a discussion we had earlier in terms of trend projection and historical data, how do we understand what's happened this year in terms of business license, in terms of tracking that revenue when you've got 2 different storms and everything else that's happened? I mean, we've issued how many roofing licenses in the last 90 days?
Several thousand.
Yeah, how do we track that in some, well, I mean, obviously we track it in regards to a gross number. How do we anticipate what that number is going to be in actuality in terms of a budget for next year?
Well, each one of those creates a permit fee and in turn creates a business license fee. So we can run reports based on industries. We're very careful in doing revenue projections, especially for the construction industry. So we'll run reports based on construction. And we'll try to do some analysis there that will discount these spikes in growth and get it back to what we consider to be our normal base for construction. And
So we've got enough historical data to know that this spike is an abnormality, and that
correct,
that we're going to see even as we continue to grow in terms of our construction numbers, we'll see a reduction in licenses more than likely.
possible, yes.
Even to the point that we would look at the fees collected for roofing permits. I mean, we can be very specific to say we know that has been very skewed this year because of the storm event. What we have to be careful of is that we had the exact same thing happen last year.
Sure.
And so we certainly don't want to anticipate that we're going to have a third hailstorm at the same interval 1 year later. But to your point, we have to be very careful of that, because we cannot anticipate that income will occur again.
Council, on the recommendation of staff, you've got first reading of ordinance number 19-2017 recommended to you. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, in executive session, we've got two matters to consider, one a personnel matter, one a legal matter. Do I hear a motion to adjourn into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, in executive session, we've considered one personnel matter and one legal matter, taking no action in regards to either one of those. Do I hear a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved. Second. Whatever.
Either or.
All at once. We
Either
have a
or.
motion, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, stand adjourned.